Good morning, everyone. Today is an exciting week. I am Shafer Suggs, women's basketball graduate, and I currently work at Long Island University as Director of Basketball Operations, as well as their social media manager. And this wonderful man in the green is my wonderful father, Shafer Suggs, former NFL player with the New York Jets and the Cincinnati Bengals, and also serves on the executive board for the vice president as NFL Former Players of Chicago. So, Dad, good morning. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Good. You have your mug?
I do have my mug. How was that?
Yeah, we got some more people sending in pictures of their mugs. It's exciting. People are loving them. I have like 4 I have to hand out. But it's exciting. Is there anything news going on in Chicago this wonderful Wednesday?
Beautiful day. We got some great news yesterday with our new potential vice president. I'm not trying to be political, but I love that choice.
Everybody loves the choice when it's going to be a black woman. So
that's right. That's why I'm getting you motivated right now. I know that you're happy about that.
Mm-hmm. You know how I am. But no, I think we had a really great show on Monday. We received a lot of great feedback. I thought it was an interesting show. We covered diversity in collegiate athletics, or I should say lack of diversity in collegiate athletics. I think it was great for us to dive into it a little bit because you and I have discussions on that many times, but also to hear other people talk about it and hear and give us our feedback on what they thought about the topic. So if you missed it, it's also on faithfamilyfocus.net. The banner is right there. That has all our past shows as well as photos of our wonderful Suggs mugs and a couple blogs written by me. And if you want to get to know us, there's also biographies as well. We have a great show coming up on Friday. It's exciting. Dad, you want to let people know a little bit about what you're going to bring to us on Friday?
Yeah, a powerful show. For many, many years, we have been trying to figure out how to alleviate pain with former NFL players, how we live in pain as a result of our previous life. And I am now experiencing a life without pain as a result of GH Fit Lab. And I'm a part of a study, a 6-month study, from GH Fit Lab that we're actually going to bring on Greg and a couple of the players to kind of share our testimonial and give examples of how, with a simple program, how we've been able to alleviate pain. And this is just a powerful show. It's something that we're sharing with the National Football League Players Association, NFL Trust. Hopefully this will be a program that we can roll out to all former players that are experiencing pain. So don't miss this show. It's a great show.
Right. Again, that's on Friday. We will also be putting out promos and information and reminders to all of you. Another quick thing while we're here, on our website, there's an opportunity for you to subscribe to updates and emails about the show. So please feel free to do that as well. So you know any new shows coming up or old shows we're running, because you know we love to do that. Today we are bringing to you our 41st episode of Faith Family Focus. We're going to talk a little bit about colorism and race in sports, especially throughout this time. I know there's a lot of craziness going on with social justice, so it would be crazy for us not to dive into some of these topics. In general, we have a cool video for those of you who don't know what colorism is, that I love for one of my favorite shows that I will share with you guys very quickly. And I think Dad loves this one as well.
My daughter was not lit properly in the class photo, and someone decided to print it anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be a fight. All right, let me give you a little context. Black people come in many shades, from Mariah Carey to Wesley Snipes. Because we look different, we get discriminated against differently. Like in the case of OJ. The magazine made his skin look darker to make him seem more villainous. And sadly, it's not just done to us, like with the "Are you darker than a brown paper bag" test. Sometimes we even discriminate against each other. It's called colorism. The racist belief that light skin is good and dark skin is bad. But it's not just us. People are color struck all around the world. In Asian communities, some people use umbrellas and visors to avoid the sun. In Indian communities, some dark-skinned actors say they have trouble starring even in Bollywood movies. And in the Latin community, Products that bleach your skin are becoming increasingly popular. But with Black Americans, people believe colorism was the brainchild of a slave owner named Willie Lynch, who taught other slave owners how to control us by dividing us by color. Turns out, the story of Willie Lynch is a hoax. But it felt real because of the fact that slave owners did divide us by color, putting dark slaves in the field and light slaves in the house. This separation caused deep-seated tension and resentment that continues to this day. The resentment is so great that it makes us hypersensitive to issues of complexion, which brings us back to this.
That's one of my favorite
Wow.
shows for
Jake,
sure.
is that why you kept kind of kicked me out of the house and you stayed in the house? Because you had to play?
You're so funny. You're so funny. No, but that's such a great. I'm
It
glad
is.
they had to cover it. That's one of those great shows that kind of makes learning this stuff a little easy for those who don't understand it. And I think Blackish is also very transcendable to all communities.
Mhm.
So a lot of people are learning from this stuff. If you haven't seen Blackish or Mixedish or Grownish, they do a pretty good job with those spinoffs, educating people on some things that maybe seem so easy for Black people, but some people have never heard of. But let's talk a little bit about what colorism really is, where we see it. It can't help but use examples like Barack Obama, Tiger Woods, Steph Curry. Let's talk Beyonce versus Jennifer Hudson. Who's more relatable? Who's more attractive in the eyes of the white man, who in the government and media? And I think the first thing we have to talk about is how it impacts sports. I mean, the first thing is that me and you have spoke a lot. We had a great article you shared with me, and then through some research that I shared with you, in that certain athletes and certain lighter or darker races, in Asian, Black, Latino, Middle East, like they go towards certain sports. Like, once again, we read in the article, which had never came to dawned on me until I read the article, that some lighter skinned women choose to go cheerleading or volleyball in comparison to track and basketball, which was kind of interesting to me because as someone, I played basketball and I really noticed, but I am pretty light, as I've been reminded a lot in my life. But you know what I mean? I mean, is that something you noticed though, Dad, when you were growing up, or when you're during your time? I'm sure it was even more different than my years.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a powerful topic. And you and I actually spent some time last night talking about this topic. And there's so much that I saw growing up. There's a difference in perception of the color of our skin 40 years ago than there is now. There's a representation now of pride and honor, and there's a lot of people that you can see that you can relate to. When I grew up, it was still something that was a result of the slave owners and the slave women. And I told you a little bit about that's what my perception of mixed was, because it was always a formation of something that was that was a result out of something really bad. So, when you saw that when I was growing up, it was a different conversation. But you also got to remember colorism. My first visibility to it was in some of our leaders. You talk about Barack Obama, but Malcolm X was white. Andrew Young was light. A lot of our leaders that were able to influence narrative were lighter color of leaders. So it goes all the way back. And now, kind of transitioning, and I know the topic is around sports because I've experienced it as a father of two biracial mixed kids, and I've seen it in the way that they were treated, the perception, especially with Devin, how they are viewed. Devin was like, okay, you're lighter skinned, so you're not very tough. You're soft. Those are perceptions. So there's so much complexity here that we can kind of dive into. It could actually be a couple different shows, but there's a lot. I'm just so happy that you picked this topic.
No, I mean, when you picked the topic, presented to me, so kudos to you. Normally I'd be making everything up. But Another thing that you asked me yesterday in our conversation is that had I experienced any of this, and I think that for me, I didn't experience it because I didn't notice it. But I was like the light. Well, besides me and I guess Eva, I was the lightest on the team, and we didn't really notice it because everybody was black on the team. You remember what I mean? Like we didn't have white girls or anything, so it was pretty much one dimension. And so I never really noticed it until I look back on it as an adult, and I kind of see how some people hung out with some people hung out with other people, some people were put on the front of the media guides, and some people weren't. And then when I got to school, when I got to Duke, we were predominantly lighter skinned team. And that's kind of what Duke's image was for a very long time, which was very interesting. Even though Duke is a predominantly white institution and has a lot of predominantly white alumni and boosters and sponsors. So it was very interesting to kind of see, now that I've stepped away from the game and stepped away from sports a little bit from the playing side, seeing where colorism kind of plays a role in the game. So when you asked me if I had experienced it, it was more kind of like I experienced it now that I'm removed from it and I can see where it kind of applied. I think that one thing we spoke a little bit about what colorism is, but also like what the symbolism is for dark skin versus light skin. In a lot of these races, we speak about dark skin often. They look at it as evil. They look at it as negative. They look at it as often just wrong. And that is what from historical, what they have built, what the white people have built. And it's very interesting because people don't understand is that this applies to all races, right? When I was at Duke, a lot of my Asian classmates would use umbrellas because they didn't want to get darker. Because that was the lighter you are, it's an image of wealth, acceptance, elitism. Like it was very different. And that's why a lot of people don't realize is where like you have Chinese versus Japanese, you have Chinese versus Vietnamese and Korean and Vietnamese are normally darker, right? In some areas in Asia. And same with Latinas and Latinos. And so it was very interesting for me to kind of read these articles and kind of touch on it because I'm sure not a lot of us have really noticed it. But now that we will now, after this show, hopefully people will start noticing it. But one of the main things that I thought that comes from colorism in sports in a broad basis is that it can become cliquey in the younger athletes in younger sports. And even though we all don't notice it, there's certain discrimination. And I spoke with someone yesterday about how college sports or coaches view their athletes without even thinking it, right? And so you have lighter kids. You have the stigma. We spoke about the black quarterback, right? You have the stigma of the lighter skin, and we spoke about Russell Wilson, Kyle Murray. I'm blanking on another name. But it's intelligent, right? It's smart. It's hardworking. Has a great work ethic. And then we look at Lamar Jackson, and they've been trying for years to get Lamar Jackson to commit to being a running back instead of a quarterback. And he was MVP and ranked number 1 in top 100 in the NFL this year. So it's very interesting how the two are kind of molded, even though they're black, right? I mean, you look at the NFL and the black quarterback, I mean, obviously there's a lot of negative correlation behind it because of the history behind the position and who gets hired for positions, like we spoke on Monday. So I think that it's interesting that you kind of see colorism come about in between Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson, or Russell Wilson and Cam Newton, right? I mean, it's just something evident. I mean, have you noticed that?
Oh yeah. So Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, this is a good topic, and we did talk about the quarterbacks relative to the stereotype. That's the position that was traditionally reserved for white quarterbacks because of the perception of intelligence, perception of just being athletic and not having the discipline to make the decisions in the pocket, right? So, but that's obviously has changed. But let's kind of talk a little bit about opportunity. Let's talk about perception of when you look at physically. Let's talk about physically. That was something that we'll touch on a little bit about Steph Curry. But when you look at a lighter colored athlete, the perception is that they're not hood enough, and they're not black enough, and there was an article about Steph Curry, and there was a comment made. I don't know if you had that in front of you, but Kevin Durant said that he was lighter skinned, that he wasn't. That was that perception,
I
right?
got it right here. I got you right
Yeah.
here. He said,
Yeah.
I thought he was white. He was this yellow kid. I'm just being real. Where I come from in the hood, we don't see that. We don't see light skinned guys around. It was all guys like me. As the dark skinned Durant told the story, Curry was engulfed with laughs as he rested his hand on Harden's back. There was clearly no offense meant or been taken. Still, there's this premise or two suppressed in the logic of Durant's remarks. First, hood and dark imply inverse relation to light and suburban, or somehow there's definitely not the ghetto. Class distinctions around Durant's observations. And it kind of also comes with like being lighter means you don't understand where a lot of people come from, and being lighter can also be uppity, like I said, elite. Um,
Your
and
tag. Your tag. Yeah.
right. But also, I think there was one thing that, and I think this is something that doesn't really come in my generation, but maybe you can relate more to during your time period, is that when you view lighter people or mixed people or people who are just like obviously not your complexion, you get the history behind it. You see the understanding. You hear where it came from, right? Where the idea of that it came from slave owners raping black women, right? It comes from the idea that it's dirty. You told me yesterday the only depictions and images that media gave you guys of biracial couples or interracial couples was like they looked trashy or they didn't look put together or educated. And so, again, even you and I speak about that nowadays a lot, is how interracial couples were depicted at the time. But in general, that light people, when they're seen, they're immediately thrown into a judgment of, okay, that's kind of like the history behind it. Where I think in my generation, we don't exactly see that as much. We just see the people are light because you have the Steph Currys, you have the Russell Wilsons, you have like a different depiction of color in sports these days. And they're doing a great job of broadcasting all kinds of black people and all kinds of Asian people and all kinds, you know what I mean? Like athletes now, it doesn't matter what they look like, who they love, etc. They're put on magazines because of what they do. And I think that's very different from your time period. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, very different. And this is a good example. The Durant Curry conversation is very true. And it's almost an intra-racial conversation that we need to have within the race. That's always been a challenge, within race. And I kind of lived it, although you always told me that I can't be in you guys' world because I'm not biracial. But I understand it because I was in a world that I was transcendable. I was in Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. So I was the perception that I was trying to be a certain way. You don't look a certain way because of the way I acted. So I kind of can relate to it, but that's that perception that you're not black enough. I remember trying to get an afro because I couldn't get an afro because my hair didn't grow because I felt like I needed to be blacker. And you see that back in my day, lighter color, red bone, yellow, high yellow. You found that they really overcompensated. They really, look as light as you are, and they really try to overcompensate that by, not even acknowledging the fact that they are, white and black. But they really, like Malcolm X was that way too, right?
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. But I think that also, like, just lighter people, black people in general, they don't have to be mixed. Like, lighter people in general have to constantly prove themselves in certain areas in sport that they do fit in, that they are tough, and they don't kind of align with that narrative that is sometimes presented to them. And I think that you're right that within the black community, within these racial communities, there is this little battle between two sides, kind of. And I think that that's because, and we have a great video on that where Shannon Sharp dives into it a little bit, but where the LeBron James KD slander, and this is something I talk about all the time. Jay Williams went on his Instagram and he spoke about how the amount of aggression and anger and effort people put towards hating LeBron James and hating Kevin Durant when they had switched teams, when they had gone to the team, right? LeBron started the first super team technically in our era. And the amount of anger and hate and just was very cringeworthy, and honestly I think was very KKK like. I when I watched it and I look back at it now when we watch like the LeBron James documentaries and you kind of see when he made the decision to move it was just like very aggressive, and I can't help but think of that, and not comparing Steph Curry to LeBron James because you obviously cannot. But if LeBron James had looked like Stephen Curry, if LeBron James had, you know what I mean, if he was lighter, would he have gotten the same slander or effort of slander that he was given? Same to Kevin Durant. I think that no, he wouldn't.
So
I mean,
there's a light skin privilege that you talk about. Do you have that video?
yeah, I have it right here. Hold on one second.
Yeah, why don't you? That's a really that would be good to share.
As obsessed as black people are, understandably, with racism, I think, unfortunately, because I hate it, we're just as obsessed with colorism. Sports is physical.
Yeah.
Basketball, football in particular, has been the domain of the field.
Yeah.
So field Negroes.
Yeah.
So, and that's historically what it's been. Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Julius Erving, Elgin Baylor, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, LeBron, KD, Kobe and Shaq. And now here come this light-skinned dude, like you said, not only dominating, but changing the game. And
you guys are resentful.
Right, and that's where...
No, Mike Skip, you love Mike. You say he's the GOAT. He didn't win one MVP unanimously. Not LeBron, not Larry, not Magic, not Russell. Nobody. Little Steph. Little 6'2", light-skinned Steph is the first. No, that ain't right.
I'm going to keep it 100. A lot of these dudes that want to hate on Steph because he's light-skinned, there's hypocrisy because they all want to date light-skinned women. I'm just keeping it real.
Okay.
There is this colorism thing in the black community is deep.
It is
and
very deep.
They think light-skinned blacks are viewed as prettier.
And they received an unfair advantage, no matter what the case may be.
Okay.
You look at Hollywood, Skip, and how the light-skinned women, they got the roles if they were to get roles. And they look at Steph as like, Steph doesn't receive the criticism like a LeBron when things go wrong.
All right.
And people become resentful of him. They're like...
But here's why, too, because he's become so dominant. Because Jason Kidd didn't get that. Because he was, as great as he wasn't like the best player in the conversation. Klay Thompson doesn't get that either. Because he's not, like, Steph has changed the game and dominated.
But Steph doesn't have biracial parents because they're both considered.
Right.
I mean, they're
but obviously
light-skinned.
there is a lot of white, like me. I don't have biracial parents, but there's a lot of white blood in me.
Okay.
So it's
So
that.
now, just in the community, we just always brought up that light-skinned guys were soft. And Matt had to prove that he wasn't soft. Because like he said, when he came in, guys were going to try it. Guys were more apt to try a guy. If you didn't know who I was, and I was the same size as Steph, and and I'm the complexion I am, if both of us walked in the room, they look at, if we're going to jump, we're going to get one, it's going to be him. Because and I had one of my coaches in college said, don't go recruit light-skinned guys. Because they're not tough.
Okay.
That was our mindset.
Would that include biracial kids?
He didn't want light-skinned kids. So they look like Chris Broussard. He was automatically thinking.
And ultimately, most of the light-skinned guys are biracial. And the interesting, and this is where I brought up the dating the women. Look at college basketball today. Look at how many light-skinned dudes there are. We can even, it's coming into the NBA, Ben Simmons, Blake Griffin, on and on, like college and I've talked to blacks.
Biracial kids, right?
But ultimately, that's what light-skinned blacks are.
Jason Kidd, biracial,
right? But now it is prominent. Is it not noticeable? And that is these Division I basketball players in the 80s hooked up with white women.
Okay.
And that's where these kids are coming from. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that is what is happening, and don't like it at all. I mean, my wife is brown skinned. I'm not into my mentality is black is black.
Right.
Because we've all faced common oppression, of racism. So I hate it, but it is very prominent within the black community.
That's why y'all not making a comeback.
Best backcourt ever. Drake rapping, Zach LaVine, Aaron Gordon, Duncan. You better hope Zion lives up to it.
We got Zion.
Light-skin element that Draymond Green brought up, Max, Molly. Yeah. I love the fact that Draymond Green brought that up. Because what's not being explained is, first of all, I don't think Steph Curry is hated. Steph Curry, being an individual who is a star.
There's so much conversation around that. So you remember the movie White Men Can't Jump? And he went to the playground and they were scamming the guys on the court, you know, and he said, well, pick any guy out on the court, and they go, oh, pick that guy. And there was what was the white kids on that, the white yeah, right, they picked him, right? So perception, because he was white, he couldn't play, right? So no, but that was real. I've never seen that, but that is really what we're talking about today.
Well, and I think it's interesting that they brought up the fact, and like I said, the LeBron James, the KDs, the people of that complexion, there's just a lot more criticism, and they gotta walk the line a little neater. They have to make sure they don't fill in the stereotypes, right? Stephen Curry has his presentation that he is perfection, he's godly, he's a great husband, a great father. I mean, he's the baby face assassin, right? And he was the first unanimous MVP. If you really think about that, like, I'm not saying LeBron James is perfect. You know how I feel about LeBron James 80% of the time. But LeBron James has been one of the greatest players of all time within his little era, right? Like, he will go as top 10, top 15 of greatest athletes of all time. So the fact that he was not a unanimous MVP, but Stephen Curry from Davidson, right, who's 6'2", little, right, barely can dunk, let's be honest about that, he was the first unanimous MVP. That to me is like very interesting. And if people want to say that it's not about race, it is at the end of the day, because he's relatable, he's transcendable, white people can understand him, anybody can understand him, he speaks well, he's articulate. I mean, they're all things that that checks off the list of somebody who can be at the front of a magazine, and he can be the face of a family network, right? I mean, he doesn't, and you know what it is, he doesn't threaten others, he doesn't threaten white people, he doesn't threaten people, right? He doesn't look like he could be someone who, and at the end of the day, that's how they view dark-skinned people, as threatening, dangerous, scary. I mean, this is all things and narratives that have been presented alongside people of dark complexion. And so it's very interesting that he said that.
White, right, and right. That's really what goes. That we're still there, and that, you know, we're tackling the topic, and when I was doing my research, and this is something that people really, we don't talk about enough. We don't talk about it enough. So I'm really happy that we're talking about it, because not only have you experienced it, but my son experienced it, and you know, I know that the people around you have experienced it. But this is a really great topic. How do NBA players look at this now? So you look at Durant, look at the relationship with Durant and Harden, right? He also, there was a comment that he actually made about who was going to be MVP, right? Between Steph and Harden. And that came down to, it wasn't really who was a better basketball player. I mean, they both put up good numbers, but maybe the style that they play, that Harden probably should be, but because Steph was lighter, you know, Harden probably had a less chance to win the MVP, right?
Well, the comment in the quote was by a college professor on the West Coast was that James Harden doesn't stand a chance to win MVP because he's too dark and he's too black compared to Curry. And that's not
from where?
A college professor out of the article.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, we don't even have to keep diving into this, but it's just the fact that it is what it is. When I talked about LeBron James and KD's decision, you can't tell me that it's not because of race. At the end of the day, it is. It's how people view them. And there's a lot more anger and hatred towards darker skinned people. That's just what it is. Think about what we taught from the beginning. White is good and black is bad. That is something they teach, right? Like, that's like, the lighter it is, the better it is, the nicer it is. That's just something the narratives that we have put in society these days through books, through anything. And and I'm glad that I said it. It really comes down to the fact that, are they threatened?
Right.
Are they threatened? What is the image of beauty in the consumer's mind at that time?
Yeah. Let's talk about on the female side. Maybe give you some examples on the female. We've been talking about men, but on the female side, you have some real good examples of that. Lolo Jones and
Madison Keys
uh,
versus Serena.
or the perception about Serena. Man, I think you showed me a couple pictures of how the media depicted them in a really negative way because of the color of their skin.
So I think the first thing we got to break down is the story behind Serena. Serena is Serena is one of the greatest athletes of all time. That is my opinion. She's successful. You can't say anything about her. Like she is what it is. She's one name standard. I mean, she's Serena Williams. Serena Williams is held to. She is not a skinny. You know what I mean? Serena Williams is like the greatest athlete of all time. Not only that, but she's kind of brown skinned. She has always kind of had to doll up in her original time period to kind of become relatable to, which tennis is a hard sport to play in because it's not very diverse, right? When Serena was upset with the call was that she was coaching, right? She was communicating with her coach, right? And she was not. She was upset. She expressed herself the same way a male would, that's my gender comment. But also just how they perceived her and were so trigger ready to dock off points, to penalize her for her outbursts, for her expression. And then the cartoon that was expressed with her was this one, which people have deemed as not racist, even though.
Oh my God, I never saw that.
Yeah. That was put out about Serena. And at the end of the day, and now you kind of see the rise right now of black female tennis players, but Naomi Osaka is lighter, right? Even though she has a little tan to her, you can see Naomi Osaka is also from Japan, right? You got Madison Keys who's always up there competing as well. I mean, there's always been that narrative. Who was the woman that Serena had to constantly play against all the time? The blonde-haired tennis player. You know who I'm talking about. There was Serena's nemesis, but she could never be.
I can't think of her name. Yeah.
You can't even pronounce her name.
I can't think or pronounce.
But she's not Serena. But that's constantly been a narrative that we have placed on it. I really highly doubt that she is anywhere equal to Serena enough to be a competitor. But the fact that you have the light and dark narrative, she's a white woman, right? 80% of people go for her. And I got to watch them when we were at the U.S. Open last August compete, and she beat her butt in 30 minutes, 15 minutes. And I was like, and this is the person who's supposed to be Serena Williams' arch nemesis, the person who's supposed to be her hardest competitor.
Right.
That's not accurate. That's a narrative we're trying to play out for the media, for people to kind of buy into, because you have the light versus dark narrative. That's just what it is. Right? If Serena was lighter, I highly doubt that they would have built that up the way they did. And then another one I saw, let's talk Lolo Jones. You and I remember when Lolo came out. Lolo's interesting. I remember when Lolo came out during the Olympics. I don't know which Olympics, but you were so key on having me watch, because that's someone who looked like me, that was successful and was athletic, which was rare for me at the time as well. But Lolo Jones really was not that great at hurdles. Let's really be honest. She was obviously Olympic worthy, but she wasn't the best. We're not looking at Usain Bolt. We're not looking at the greatest track athlete of all time, but the amount of media coverage, support from people, sponsorships, endorsements that Lolo Jones got was obscene compared to her other counterparts, co-workers. I don't know how to say it. Remember that?
I do. Yeah. For her counterpart, she, and it's consistent with what we're trying to talk about. She was the first woman of color that had light skin that was very successful. You were able to relate. I grew up with Wilma Rudolph, who was the first great Olympic African American athlete, but nowhere near the publicity. You have to dig into the history books about Wilma Rudolph. Lolo Jones, right? She was actually the face of a program. She was the face of the Olympics, right? Just because of the color of her skin. She was light, and she was marketable. She was brandable, and I kind of wanted you to run track. So it was there, and then there was Candace Parker. The people that not only athletically, you can be aspire to be like them. They also look like you too. So we didn't have that visibility. There wasn't that visibility back in the 60s and the 70s, where now you have that for a lot of
Right.
kids of color. You see a lot of kids of color that have somebody like that.
Right, because there's so many different forms of spectrum
Right.
in for you to look up to, which is what I said earlier. It's just like you see a generational difference. But with the Lolo Jones stuff, is that Lolo Jones, we talked about, criticism within the community. Lolo Jones was criticized by two other really great track athletes because we were like, we're more successful than her right now. We're killing the Olympics, but Lolo's getting all the coverage.
Right.
Lolo's getting all the media. Lolo's on the cover of the newspaper every time we wake up. Lolo has Nike coming for her. No, Lolo has Adidas coming for her. Right? Lolo has all this stuff, and it's because Lolo at the time was presentable. They wanted to use Lolo to be Lolo really was the face of the Olympics. Like, that was a really accurate statement that you said. Like, you didn't even have to watch track to know that Lolo was like in the Olympics. Like, it was almost like she was the Olympics at that time. It was very interesting. And now she's like in bobsledding. So I guess Lolo's trying to.
Well, in preparation for this, I think you do good research. Did you send me the pictures of the two other track athletes? Yeah, right. So there you go. There's a good depiction of that, right? So I mean, this is the theme of our program, colorism, right? And who was on the cover, right, of the magazine? So this is again a topic that no one really talks about, but it is so true within interracial dialogue that we continue to need to have. That still exists.
I agree with you, and it's hard not to like use Lolo to kind of segue into the main person that creates this narrative, the main person who tells the story, and that's the media in sports marketing, and in who presents the people to who is the face of Nike for the year, right? Nike supported Serena 100% last year, but Allison Felix got dropped by Nike the year before because she had a baby and she got pregnant, right? Nike dropped her because she wasn't producing. Now we see the Serena narrative. Nike's learning from their mistakes and being like, all right, we have to promote Serena. So they created the cat suit that Serena wore that protected her and helped blood flow because she had almost died during pregnancy and she was very high level to stroke. But what you see is that the narrative is starting to change year by year. Obviously, the media is learning from their mistakes. But through most of my life, media has only presented lighter people. Let's look at the body issue about ESPN. A lot of the female athletes are either white or light, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's a very vulnerable and intimate issue. That's the one where like they're completely naked, but they like show off and they have a great photographer that makes them look great. But those people are normally lighter skinned people and lighter skinned or white athletes. And nowadays you're seeing the body issue kind of transcend a little bit into different athletes. You got Cam Newton. Right. You have it's changing, right?
It is changing. It's changing rapidly. You're so right. I mean, and when you talk about my different decades and generations, but this was nothing about what I saw growing up, right?
Right.
It was just no one talked about it, right? No one really talked about it. As an African American male, we were just happy to be there and be participating, right? Not long we were there because of the color of our skin, but we progressed, and that's why I was really happy. I'm very blessed to have you when I had you, because you were able to have good examples of, there's people like you, but then within that, there's challenges within that, right? Because you get discriminated against because of the lighter skin of your color, and then vice versa. People with lighter skin has perception to be uppity, and so you have that dynamic that's going on, and those are things I love that we're talking about, because people from the outside don't really understand it exists, and it does, right? But I know we're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think another thing that comes with that is acknowledging your privilege. I think that's something that during right now society, a lot of people are realizing that even if you are Black or like biracial, you also have to acknowledge your small part of privilege that you have in comparison to someone like you, Dad. Like, I have more privilege than you do in this society, so I have to acknowledge it and use it for the good, right? Like I have to be able to help you and have your back and protect you and fix what's wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like this is something that like I think that people are starting to come to terms with even more nowadays. And I think the media is giving a lot of great. It's like maybe the idea of becoming an ally, using
Right.
your privilege to be an ally to those who don't have privilege. Like you have privilege because you're a man. Like understanding your privilege in all of this, like it's crazy. And I think that years ago we wouldn't have noticed it because it's more of a battle and it's a them versus you and stuff like that. But it's when people start acknowledging the privilege they have, like a lighter skinned person like myself, I have a privilege, so I have a responsibility to do better for other people, right? Even though I still have my own form of oppression and my still forms of discrimination, I'm extremely lucky to not have to deal with like some days I can pass as like you know what I mean, the paper bag test. Like we always say, like I get very lucky in certain situations in comparison to you. Or like remember you used to say like we walk into restaurants. I tell people this all the time. They think it's like not true. When we walk in restaurants, if you walk in first, we sit next to the kitchen. If Devin and I walk in first, we're maybe not next to the kitchen, but we're like 5 booths away from the kitchen. Like it's very.
What would you like to sit? Right. Yeah.
Right. And so it's just understanding that me, Devin, and I, we have privilege, and in that we have to use our privilege as a responsibility. And I think the media now is kind of like generating and supporting and understanding what needs to be presented, what needs to be documented, and what the narrative needs to be. There's a lot of dark skinned and brown skinned kids around the world who need to see these faces on magazines, these faces on ESPN and SportsCenter, and getting the acknowledgement that they deserve, right? They need the books they deserve, right? They need the coverage. They need to be in the history books. They need to be able to be seen on daily basis in schools, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just something. But another thing about the media, I had found a cool picture that was kind of like interesting that I had noticed because in tennis, a lot of stuff they do is like the cartoons and the pictures where they draw, right? Is how they cover tennis a lot.
Yeah.
The one that I had noticed was Naomi Osaka's image where they had lightened her skin and took away her freckles and in a way straightened her hair as well. Naomi Osaka has like very coarse, like thick hair.
Right.
But yeah, and that one was for me, I was just like that was like we see it. That's stuff that happens. They do it easily. Like, how can we make this? How can we sell this? How can we sell this person?
Right. So let me share something with you. Remember this when? Okay. So it's also the opposite effect when you're trying to accomplish parity and So do you remember the picture of Devin when they presented him at Yale? How they darkened his picture.
Yeah.
They darken his picture just to validate that they have more African American players, right? But that was really interesting how they darkened his picture. Did you notice that? Remember?
Yes, I did. No, I did. Because that's the job I do on a daily basis. And it's something that I have had to realize and understand is because I'm in a form of marketing, and I have to make sure with the story that we present as a university, because I work at Long Island University in Brooklyn. So our biggest thing is that we're diverse. Right. And what I try to do is try to present the girls equally, right?
Gotcha.
It's not just faces. And that is something that I have noticed through collegiate sports, especially is not, because professional sports, you present the star, right? You present the tickets. But in collegiate sports, who appeals to alumni, who appeals to the boosters, and a lot of schools have white wealthy boosters, white wealthy alumni, and so you have to be presenting to them something that they want to see. And it's not saying they just want to see white people on the cover, but it's kind of seeing like, oh wow, this kid looks really nice, and it's a lighter skinned kid, or someone. It's just like, oh wow, we have such a great diversity within our sports department. And the kid is like in the middle of the spectrum, right? And they're at the end of the day, that's just what they do. And that's what I've noticed being in collegiate sports and playing collegiate sports at a school which has a major image at Duke of clean, neat, respectable student athletes, right? No tattoos, um, clean hair, no colored hair. Like, those are things like we had to make sure we did because, and it wasn't something that was told to us. It was a culture and a feeling that we were in, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's just what it was. I mean, Duke men's basketball, even though
changed a lot.
it changed a lot through the years, and maybe my freshman year coming in was the year of like the tattoos really started. The year before that was like the Duke starting five, like had like the thick coarse hair, which wasn't clean and cut, and they like it was just something that they did. And I think that you kind of see the narrative at Duke change, but you know what? Duke basketball can do that because it's Duke basketball, right? And they make enough money where they don't need your money. Where on the women's side, it's very interesting in how we present who on the media guide and who we bring in as recruits. And during my time there, we were very light. It is what it is. And now you kind of see that starting to change a little bit. But also there's the form of the idea of intelligence. Who's smart enough to be at these universities? And I think one special group is Stanford, the Obumike sisters, who are African and they have great dark skin. Like this is a known fact, and they're geniuses. I mean, they're all able to go to med school. They're all really smart and intelligent, which is very an African thing, like very disciplined in their education. They take a lot of pride in it. And those 3 or 4, because the other one goes to Rice, which is another great academic school. And these girls were on the front of media coverage at Stanford.
Right.
Getting the publicity they deserve. And I kudos to Tara Vanderveer for doing that because this started way before I even got to college, right? And it's important that little girls saw them
very important
on TV, right? They saw them cut UConn's 88 or 83 winning streak, right? Stanford, they were the faces on the TV. Both the sisters were the ones who had did that. So I think that we're starting to see a little bit as sports kind of leads the way. I think the biggest problem, the biggest battle we're fighting is the media and how the media covers and how the media presents the narrative of these things. Because I feel like within sports, we already got it, right? We're already 5 steps ahead. But the media, of course, has to provide for the consumer. And the consumer is ready, media. But right now, you kind of see especially in 2020, this year, the media has kind of said, who cares?
Right. Let me ask you a question. Do you have the picture of the covers of magazines of athletes on covers? I don't know if you got that. If not, that's okay because I want to kind of share that. And then
Yep, you see it.
Right. So, but you don't see any. Other than maybe Kobe, you don't really see any people of color on major magazine, right? I mean, it gets back to the entertainment industry. Back when I was younger, Faith, when I got a Temptations album, you never saw the pictures of African American artists on covers.
Right.
They were never on covers. But I wrote this down. Remember the Fab Five, Michigan against Duke? Remember that? That's where that kind of where I remember maybe the first highly publicized conversation around perception because the Fab Five were 5 African American great freshman basketball players against Duke, which was the Grant Hills and how that conversation about right.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that is, I remember the girl's name. That is like Serena versus Maria Sharapova.
That's it.
That is what it is at the end of the day. Like, this is the narrative we're presenting. Fab Five, right? They're ahead of their time. They're culturally breaking barriers, right?
Long pants, baggy pants, right?
The black socks, right? It was something they didn't care about, right? In comparison to Duke, clean cut. That is the culture of places like Duke, right? We have to be sellable. Right? We have to look great. We can't be experimenting with purple in our hair. That's not something we do at Duke. And if we do, it's just kind of like, are you going to get your hair done before picture day? You know what I mean? Like, these are things that we experience because we have something to sell. We're being sold, kind of, right, to the people. That's what NCAA is. But I think that one thing that me and you discussed yesterday was just the fact that it really is the media's narrative presenting. And it's kind of this colorism plays a role into so much marketing and so much of sports right now, and it's interesting to see the rejection of it during this year, right? And the embracing every color on the spectrum in sports media, and it's cool to see. It's very exciting, and hopefully it sticks. Um, will it? I don't know.
Well, we have continue to have constant conversation around this. Your generation is paving the way, not only with the topic we're talking about right now, the injustice piece of it, and just having the courage to really voice, what's right, and the representation that you come in all colors, and it doesn't really matter.
Right.
It's so different. I mean, I'm old, and I told you, things that I saw was just so different. I mean, my first Black movie star was Sidney Poitier, who was very, very dark.
I don't know.
So who would have thought? Yeah, And so he was my favorite, right? And that was back in the day. He was in a movie called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which was interracial. Way before his time, right? So, but no, this is really good conversation. I want to ask you again about your role as, how you depict and as a social media person. So, what are the breakdowns of the socioeconomical? Your girls are coming from where?
Northeast.
All over the country. Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 white girls.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
House is Black, biracial, just all over, right?
Mm-hmm.
New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, right? So we have a lot of North kids, a lot of New York kids. So our breakdown, and it's very interesting. We're going through all this because right now a lot of coaches are trying to navigate how to communicate with their kids during this time period, and we don't really have to because our kids are on the same page as us. We have to make sure we communicate with the one white kid to make sure she understands kind of what's going on so she feels comfortable, because she is a minority within
That's what I'm trying to get at. Mm-hmm.
Right, she's a minority in our space. But like I said before, we hired Coach Haynes is the only female Black coach in all of LIU. And I'm pretty sure she's one of the only Black coaches, period. And we have most of the Black coaches normally the Black coaches are the ones with the Black kids, right? And that's normal in a lot of places, right? And one thing we like to do is I try to be able to present her narrative and what she wants for our program to the world and to people who are looking to come to our program. And one of my things is we are extremely diverse. She is not ashamed of her beliefs. Rini is very strong in how she feels about Black lives, and she's very presentable in how she feels about that. I mean, she dedicates all of African American History Month to, she wears a shirt every single game where she dedicates to a Black woman or a Black man or certain people or names, and that's something that she does, and she's very transparent about who she is and what she believes, and that's major in how I present our program, and that's major. And that's what you're starting to see Nike do and Under Armour do. And people understand that they're consumers. And I think, who said it? Reebok said it best. They said, without Black people, we are nothing. We would not be where we are, right? Because you have to understand your consumer at the end of the day. You can't be afraid of stepping on eggshells. You have to present what people want to relate to and not what people want to see. Does that make sense? Like, it's that time nowadays.
Wow.
So you're starting to see that. I think that basketball, football, track, these sports are already ahead of their time in presenting not along the narrative of colorism, but along this presenting what's right and who's best. So we'll see how other sports do that. I really don't know. I mean, we'll see. I know soccer is a very diverse game in the professional level, so we'll see about that. So, but I think this was really a great discussion.
Awesome.
I'm really excited for your show on Friday. I'm glad everyone got to join us today. I saw your names, your comments, your likes tickling in. But no, Dad, I'm really excited for Friday and for what you have going on.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good show. Just kind of give some insight on there's hope that we can live life without pain, especially being an older dad. I know it's something that you like seeing that, taking care of myself, but it's going to be a really, really good show. And but backing up, really enjoyed this show. I really enjoyed it, and obviously we can continue on down the road, continue to talk about this because it's an ongoing topic. So thank you.
Right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining this wonderful Wednesday. We are so thankful for you guys to stop by and discuss this a little bit with us. We know these are sensitive topics, but we're already taking the step in the right direction of having uncomfortable conversations. Of course, we want to thank Amazon Fire, YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Apple TV, and most importantly, out of Phoenix, Arizona, E360 TV. We'll see you guys on Friday to discuss an awesome discussion. Don't miss it. You can't, because we're going to promo the heck out of it. And most importantly, we are faith family focused. We want to use our faith as a vehicle to help heal and sustain others on strengthening their own family core. And of course, like always, let go, let God, let go, let faith, let go, let love. Everyone have a healthy and safe Wednesday. Please wear your mask, and we'll see you guys on Friday.